who is a senior director here in New York, which is where we are hosting the webinar today, and is the senior director of the analytic practice at Interbrand, one of the largest global consultancies that quantify the value of brands for top businesses around the world. Aaron is someone I've worked with had the pleasure of working with in past lives in different capacities, and we're very, I think, lucky to have him today because he has over 15 years of very heavy research and modeling experience that's been focused on informing brands, advertising, and communication strategies. He has worked at Interbrand now, and then before that he was at Harris Interactive. He was at TNS and focused in brand and communication in that space. But as always, Aaron is always about asking really good questions to get at the business issues. So the reason that we have Aaron here today is that he can provide us a perspective that goes kind of beyond. He uses all kinds of data sets, and it's really about getting a perspective that is outside of just the PR communication and understanding when people are taking a step back and looking at the big B of brand. What are the things that they're thinking about? What is the C-suite talking about? What are some of the concerns and issues that are coming up? And what kind of data is important? And why do we need, as PR communication professionals, to make sure we're part of that conversation? We're also joined today by Allison Hewley, who is the Executive Vice President. The Executive Vice President of Measurement, Analytics, and Insights at Weber Shandwick, as everyone will know, a top PR agency, global PR agency. And she's really responsible for a global network and is spearheading agency thought leadership in this area and provides counsel to the agency's top global accounts. She's been there since 2011 and has really worked with quite an impressive array of clients in a variety of sectors, from tech to consumer, to retail, such as the Dell Foundation, Honeywell, CVS, Samsung, etc. She's also the North American chair of the International Association for Measurement and Evaluation, AMEC, which I'm going to talk about a little bit because they did some really interesting research that I think also helps us understand why the heck we should care about all of this and gives us some data to use in terms of understanding why we need to be part of this conversation and the opportunities for all of us if we become part of that conversation. So let's get to the discussion. Again, today we're really looking for a better understanding of some real simple things. Just what technically is big data? So that we can, when that term gets thrown at us, we can have just a thoughtful response and guide maybe some of the conversation to understand, are we really having a conversation about big data, or hopefully maybe having a conversation about valuable data? And then we want to talk about how it can help us, especially when we think about it in terms of valuable data and providing valuable data and insight, how data can help us to get our job done as communication professionals. And we also want to be able to leave you today with some insight, and Allison's going to focus on this, on how to get started with using data within an organization to show the value of PR in an organization. And this perspective will help you both if you're on the corporate side as well as if you are on the agency side of the business. So before the what of big data, let's just take just a couple of minutes of why should PRs even really care about this. And I know that we wouldn't be on this call today if we didn't think there was some reason to care about it, but I thought it worthwhile to take a moment to share some data around this that AMEC put together. They did a survey in 2012, and AMEC, for those of you who don't know, is an association for measurement and evaluation of communications, as I mentioned. But it's more than an association. It has 87 members, not individuals, but organizations that are members of it from North, and that represent the world. They're from agencies from North and South America, from Western Europe, from Eastern Europe, from the Middle East, from Asia. They represent governments, are part of AMEC. PR agencies are part of, and management consultancies are part of AMEC, and evaluation firms like Workana are part of AMEC. And what this survey showed is that, again, this was done among the AMEC membership earlier this year, is basically that, first of all, revenues from PR measurement companies that are part of it are growing, right? So people who care about this and are interested are seeing their revenues grow. So that kind of gives an indication of the importance of measurement, how it's growing. And all of the members definitely see it as more of an imperative versus just a nice to have. So we've really seen an increase in the amount of PR agencies and consultancies that are becoming part of AMEC and interested in AMEC because it's part of their own businesses. They're seeing that measurement every time they have an engagement about helping a company improve their communications, improve their public relations. At the same time, they're being asked to also show how those programs are working to help the business. And again, we also saw from people who are in this business that they see a significant opportunity around for when it comes to future growth, and that integrating with other marketing and analytics was cited by over half as one of the significant areas of growth within that space. So again, there's growth that's happening. People think it's important, both from the agency and from the client side, so it's definitely a discussion we should all be having. And on that note, I'd like to pass this over to Aaron Golonsky to tell us a little bit about what is big data from your perspective, Aaron?
Thanks, Jenny. First, just for the audience, apologies in advance. I'm finishing up battling a cold, so there'll be the occasional cough, and forgive me for that. I also want to start out a little bit, because I can't help myself, because I have a passion for brands. Jumping off of where Jenny started in the why big data for brands in specific, and this is something that we've been looking at Interbrand for a while at this point. And this is a little far out there, and I promise we'll come further back in as well, towards reality as well. But I really believe we're at the beginning of a revolution. Organizations have really begun to start to use data in a way not just to help inform things, but to enhance the lives of their customers in deep and meaningful ways. What's happening also then is there's a growing expectation that successful brands are going to be able to have more direct and intimate relationships with their customers by providing actionable insight that can move its way into empowerment of the people. So to me, it's important to understand big data, because soon enough, customers and consumers are going to be demanding the benefits of it, and brands really need to deliver. As the market matures and we think about where we are, I think in the near future even, capturing these enormous volumes of data that's going on now, it's not going to be that impressive anymore, because there's a lot of it going on. Successful brands, as it suggests, really will have to up their game. And I like to think of them as becoming, and like I said, going a little far out, trusted choice-making agents. So they're going to start making the choices for us. And the reason that brand is so important is, who are you going to trust to make those choices for you? Is it going to be Google? Is it going to be Amazon? Can they pull this off? Because more and more, if we cede this control, we have to do it for someone who we know isn't going to abuse that trust. The stakes are high. It's happening fast. I've seen numbers that were looking like 4.4 million data scientists are going to be needed in 2015. Only a third of those positions currently have been filled. Further out, 2020, I've seen estimates, and make of it what you will, that there'll be 4 times the amount of digital data out there than there are grains of sand on the earth. Okay, so just what is big data then, after we've sort of started off with that? So necessarily in the name, the big is in there. In the strictest sense, big data really has to do with these data sets that are so large they, even just a few years ago, couldn't be easily analyzed. That's why we have the big there, and that's why there are companies out there that are analyzing petabytes of data at a time, looking for those critical nuggets of insight. If you're wondering, a petabyte is a million gigabytes, or 13 years of high-definition content, which might probably just clear my Netflix queue, I think. When I talk to clients, though, I shift the definition and the focus of big data a bit, because unless you're Amazon or Tesco, you aren't necessarily going to have gigantic data, but there's more and more accessible for companies to be able to have new data streams allowing them new analytic applications that they can use, facilitating this trend towards moving closer to the customer. Speaking of these types of big data, I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with stuff like social media data as big data, but of course there's a lot more out there. Companies have point-of-sale data, customer databases, loyalty card data. Then we get into unstructured data, things like call center logs, chat logs, you name it. Of course, with the internet, if we think about it, there's web traffic data, there's going to be ad exposure, specific engagement that you're having on websites. With the advent of the pervasive smartphone, you now have this geolocation data that's out there, app usage data that you have out there. You're signing up on with apps to let them really peer into exactly what you're doing, when you're sending your texts, how many you're sending. Can even get creepier as well, where there are companies out there selling sensors that retailers and lots of companies will allow them to place in their stores so they'll know when you're just a few feet away. There are certainly applications for that, but in some sense, a brave new world. So have I sufficiently intimidated you?
Just a little.
I kid. Obviously, that's not my goal. Big data is intimidating, though. It's intimidating to me. I think it's intimidating to a lot of people. New things, new ways to think about your business, lots and lots of unknowns, and asking management to make investments based on leaps of faith at times. So should you just give up? I certainly hope not, and I don't recommend that. I always think about taking baby steps into big data. So the baby steps for me for big data is to forget about the gigas, the teras, the Hadoop clusters, and whatever else. You know, put the jargon aside and just start to get your hands on some of this new data. I mean, certainly close in for a lot of us. I'd encourage you to play with social media data. Maybe you can line up your sales data against that, look at that against some survey data as well, and see what the relationships are there. Don't focus on the bigness of the data, and I know Allison will be talking about that later, certainly, and more eloquently, but rather really try to focus on answer real and important business questions. And secondly, you know, just try and dip your toes into those unfamiliar data streams. Once you start messing with it, you realize it isn't magic in the end. It's stuff that actually makes a lot of sense. And I'll also suggest, and I'm going to get to Allison, I'll talk about this as well, it's stuff that may not make a lot of sense too, but since people can measure it, they go ahead and do it. Just because you measure it doesn't mean it's something that's worth sort of thinking about. You know, I've had people ask me about what analytic tools they should use when they're working with big data. To start with, I just ask you to use your eyes. You know, in graduate school, that was one of the first things I learned, which was really just start to understand the basics of the data and what's underneath it and what it looks like. There's a lot more you can do out there. It certainly gets complex. There's vendors, your IBMs, your HPs, whoever, who have their software solutions for it that will take you several steps away. I would suggest work your way to get there. So what's between those baby steps and sort of full on? That's the world that I tend to live in. So, you know, to sort of talk about that and also why I think you should join the big data conversation, I need to give a little bit of background here for the audience. Interbrand, as Jenny said earlier, is a full-service brand and experience consulting firm. I think we can credibly claim, I've heard it different, but that we're the largest branding agency in the world. We really work with brands from start to finish for the purpose of measuring, managing, and building brand value. This includes brand strategy, analytics, a lot of what we're talking about here, naming, verbal identity, visual identity, and then in providing brand management systems and activating what we're doing. Where this is relevant is one of the offerings we have at Interbrand that we're actually famous for is brand valuation. It's the practice of putting an arm's length financial value on the brand asset that an organization has. It's something we're known for because we are the creators of the practice. Since we have an audience that I know is very well represented by the UK, it's just worth a little piece of trivia that the first brand valuation was done back in 1988 as part of a hostile takeover defense for Rank Hovis McDougal. And from there, it's just sort of taken off. At this point, the industry set up ISO certification for it. We've refined the practice. Certainly, there are a number of other firms that have as well. Back to Interbrand specifically, in the addition to sort of the proprietary brand valuations we do, we also do a league table every year where we look at the best global brands. And not only are we sort of giving the rank of each of these brands, but also a bit around the what and the why they achieve that value, which is of significant interest to the C-suite, as noted in the PR Week survey there. So why am I talking about this today with all that set up there? Well, it happens to be an important strategic tool, but it's also a great example of work that leverages many different data streams. Some are bigger and some are smaller, if you will. Strategically, brand valuation at the most basic level is used by organizations to try to get their competitive edge, use a competitive advantage. Brands that are higher in brand value have been shown to outperform those lower in brand value. The logic is that a strong brand is likely to carry a company through lean times, can protect share, maintain a price premium, all the things that brand practitioners would be looking for. So by measuring and building brand value, you're increasing the enterprise value. Beyond that, I know a few companies who have actually targeted executive compensation against it, up through the C-suite there. Brand value and one of the components there, brand strength, that we're going to be talking more about, are used with great frequency on management scorecards. Tactically, brand valuation is used to support key business decisions. Should a brand be retired? Is a particular brand worth investing in, or just sort of letting die away? A frequent use case is to figure out if a brand should continue paying a licensing fee, or if it would be better off building a new brand. Why pay for something if you can go build it at a better price against what it's worth? We also have quite an active practice around brand valuation to inform mergers and acquisitions. So if you look at the diagram that I've laid out there on brand value, there are three elements: financial forecast, which is what it is; role of brand, this is how much brand plays a factor in the choice that is made to purchase, engage with a brand; and then finally, brand strength. Brand strength has underneath it 10 dimensions, not worth getting into today, but it's a number of dimensions in it that have really been shown to be the core elements for driving brand equity. Underneath each of those elements is where we overlay many different data streams. This is where we'll use, of course, closer in things like survey data, social media data, but also we're using website data. We're working off of customer databases, looking at loyalty behavior, share of wallet data, just really bringing in this wide range of information to get us robust information about each of these brands. One of the things I can say that actually comes in somewhat infrequently is PR data. This isn't because we avoid it. I have a sort of standard request I make to our clients when we want to first get data there. It's on the list. Rarely they don't have very deep data. In my experience, we're dealing with things that really are focused on the top level, maybe just volume. I don't know necessarily what I can do with that when we really need to go beyond that. And that's a real missed opportunity, I think, because these are conversations we're having when we're talking about the brand value, where we are tying marketing activity, communications activity, you name it, back to financials. And I think, as we all know, it's the CEO's responsibility and the C-suite's responsibility to answer to shareholders to be driving this financial value. Anything else is literally irresponsible in terms of what their roles are. So this is what they want to see, especially since the downturn in the economy. It's going back 6 or 7 years now. Everything needs to be quantified, which is all the same also why, and I won't spend a ton of time on it, why we are doing a lot of work on ROI. People are going to want to see that, which lets us get into some more strict modeling as it relates towards really trying to understand the impact of all of this activity. And then finally, some of the newer things we're doing that really gets us into true big data, if you will, has to do with customer experience optimization and touch point valuation. And so really understanding the environment people are engaged in, what's important for who at what times, is finally graduating there. So what I wanted to lay out for you there were sort of 3 steps, if you will, in terms of increasing bigness of data that we're working with. Not appropriate for everyone, but in all cases, I would suggest that since it's really leading to this quantification that's being looked at the highest levels, it's certainly important for anyone to think about, and certainly the PR space. But where do you get started?
So I think it's important when we're thinking about how to get started. As I was listening to Jenny open the conversation, I realized in putting together my slide that first it's about educating yourselves, and being on this type of a webinar is definitely part of that. But just wanted to flag that there are a couple of things you could do to go a little bit deeper. Become part of the conversation. Identify opportunities to just, if you don't necessarily think of yourself as an analytics person, where you can become parts of those communities of discussion and begin to develop, which is tied to point 3, that idea of sort of fluency across multiple data streams. I think organizations like AMEC, for example, and I think the summary that Jenny gave in terms of the diversity of the membership base in an organization like AMEC that allows you to interface with consultants from Booz Allen Hamilton, from leading brands to leading agencies to leading nonprofits to government organizations. It provides an opportunity to understand how different sectors and aspects of business are talking about data and some of the issues and challenges that are important to them. So that's one just kind of recommendation. It's not as hard as you think, and it also may not be as expensive as you think. I think there's been a lot of conversation around, do we need to go and get a master's degree in predictive analytics? I would say that's probably not the way to get started. But there are a couple of ways that you can kind of, to Erin's point, put a toe in the water. There are things like AMEC College. There are even free education opportunities like on Coursera, where you can just sign up for something for 8 weeks and begin to become familiar with the language of data, different tool sets that can be incredibly powerful. It's also, for people that have been in the industry for a while, even if you're on the analytics side, just to refresh, what's the latest thinking. So those are kind of 2, I think, fast ways to get started. It's about getting into the conversation, becoming educated. I think as you mature in the space, getting started then becomes, how can you own the conversation? So some of the things that we've been doing at Weber is to try to create events with data scientists where people can come in and actually listen to what does the former head of research at ARF say about where data is going in communication. So become part of the conversation. I think there are many ways to do it. There were even data meetups that you can search for. Again, low cost, just begin to meet people and have a dialogue around it. Once you've gotten familiar with sort of the language and some of the basics and begin to feel that you've kind of removed some of those maybe emotional barriers to embracing big data or embracing analytics, try to find partners, because the next thing is figuring out how do you play with it. I think that was one of the points Erin made as well. So focus on sectors or focus on clients, internal and external. I think being on the agency side, we have sort of at Weber, we have a unique opportunity to identify sort of different paths to champions. One is internally, if you're on the agency side, are there practice areas within your organization that you have found that have sort of a facility with data? Usually it's healthcare, because they're often doing a lot of times medical reporting, or a lot of the information that they have to share, whether it's FDA approvals or anything like that, involve data. So they sort of come to it naturally. That's a great opportunity to figure out what can we do more to bring more to our clients. Also, tends to be one of those higher bar client areas that are often demanding data. I think another area on the client side or the team side would be practices that are focusing on tech and manufacturing. Within tech, I know at Weber we are dealing with clients like Getty Images, like Honeywell. These are engineers, or they're building out very sophisticated tech applications. So they have a facility with data and an expectation for it. Those are clients that you want to have conversations with to say, okay, within the context of PR, how can we get more advanced, more sophisticated? Also, in many cases, they have infrastructure, whether it's websites that also allow for you to think more broadly in terms of site analytics, more sophisticated setups, better structure, where you can get access to higher volumes of data across channel, but also tends to be quality data. Manufacturing, again, engineers. They care a lot about data. Making the case to them requires that you have it, so they probably are also going to be good allies. I think within FMCG, tend to be very mature. I think they're doing a lot of interesting things there, particularly in the social space in terms of trying to prove value, working on the client side with research companies like Kantar, like Datalogix, where they're actually trying to quantify the value of things like Facebook fans and prove ROI. Great opportunities to begin to work with your clients to understand the data streams that they're putting in place, not just the pieces that you own. So I think part of it is really figuring out the opportunities to identify the partners, people that either have a passion for data and interested in or can help you get access to it. I think the other piece is just sort of more of an emotional or responsibility, really understanding that agencies can play a role in breaking down these barriers. And I think at the heart of this is really one of the points that Erin made around it starts with the questions. If you are asking really smart questions of your clients and challenging them to think more broadly outside of their sphere, with respect to the data that they have, and then proving that having these additional data points that may be managed by another agency partner but are tied to the work that we're doing, tying all of this together can create a really strong case for the value. I think one of the challenges that we're facing is as the charge of public relations is broadened, also more larger clients in particular are working with IATs or interagency teams. Everyone has to work together. So one, you have to understand the language that your other agency partners are speaking in order to be in the best position to ask the right types of questions, and then work with your clients to say, if we want to focus on what our contribution is within the broader context, you're in a much better position to do that. But I think it starts with the question. And then start with small wins. You know, it's not coming into a client and saying, we want to be your analytics agency of record. No, it's thinking smarter around everything from data visualization. How can we get a better dashboard pulled together that helps you communicate the value of data within your organization and help your clients win more champions? And that can be, again, even if you're not on the agency side, if you're responsible for data, you still have your internal clients. And the best thing you can do is make that data easily accessible. If possible, move away from PowerPoint. Begin to put things on apps and automatic dashboards and ways that put data immediately in the hands of people. And in some cases, had a really interesting conversation with someone earlier this week that is responsible for analytics and SEO at MTV. And one of the things that she said that she did to break through was to create some dashboards using some readily available tools. I think she referenced like Chartbeat or something like that. And basically what she was able to do by putting it in people's hands, either on their iPhone or on their tablet, they're coming into meetings, and it's less about, I can't afford data, but it's almost creating sort of an internal competition for, look what I've done, look what I've achieved, look how much smarter we've gotten with this data. So again, part of it is really just making it accessible. I think that the next piece in terms of getting started, and what I think is really important, we've spent a lot of time on this at Weber over the past few months, is you've got to step back and step away from the myths around big data. Really begin to develop your own clarity on the topic, which I think so many of Erin's points are spot on in terms of trying to get to a place of reality, because it is an incredibly big term. When you start to unpack it, when you start to think about the applicability, it's actually not as intimidating as you might think. So we'll spend just a few minutes on a couple of the kind of myths that we've tried to focus on debunking on the Weber side. First, there is this pressure, because it's talked about so much, around the idea that everyone is using big data. That is a huge, it's a sort of a myth. Many, many companies are using big data. Many more companies have gotten involved in the data game, whether they be on the communication side or PR or client side. What we've seen, however, in research is it's not just about having access to the data or using it, it's about using it well. And there was research that came out earlier this year by Bain & Company Consultancy that basically said that there are only about 4% of companies that are using it well. So we're probably we're all in the majority. We're all probably somewhere in that degree of 96% that are figuring it out, and that's okay, because the data streams are coming faster, they're more diverse, it's part of the natural maturation process. So, if you're getting pressure from, senior management or others in your organization, it really is an idea of, we're going to begin to move in this direction, but it's a process, it's a journey, and quite frankly, this pressure that we feel that everyone is so much more sophisticated, so much more advanced, just put that aside for now, because really there's a small, very small elite few that do this really, really well. Most are figuring it out, and again, find those allies in the conversation that can help you on the journey to figuring this out. The second piece is that there's sort of this perception that you have to be, in order to succeed